Hello there. Good afternoon to you. I said yesterday after our conversation about climate change that I would keep returning to the subject, and I will, in the coming months, I mean. And this morning, Cressida Dick, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, when she was speaking to Nick Ferrari on LBC, in a sense threw down the gauntlet to Extinction Rebellion protesters planning a fortnight of demonstrations in London with particular focus on the city, and there's no doubt that other groupings of Extinction Rebellion will have action around the rest of the UK as well, much as they did a couple of years ago. She threatened the climate activists. She described them as disingenuous sometimes when it comes to interacting with police, and she talked about a fair but firm response being in the offing for them, and said Londoners do not want disruptive protests. We'll get more detail on what she said in a moment from Rachel Venables. And of course, nobody wants disruptive protests. Nobody going about their business wants it to be made more difficult than it already is in a busy city sometimes. But I wonder whether she's right about this. I wonder whether, and you can tell me this hour, I talked yesterday about my own growing realization of how passivity in the face of climate change, it is an option. You can continue to be passive about it if you wish, and I've been too passive about it over the years for sure. But that's come to an end for me, and I'm not saying I'm going to sit cross-legged on Waterloo Bridge along with the Extinction Rebellion protesters. I mean, never say never, but that's not what I mean when I say my passivity has stopped. But I'm engaging my brain much more actively about it and planning to make my choices much more actively pro-planet than I've really chosen to in the past. And I wonder whether, like me, as long as people aren't violent and as long as people don't hurt one another, hurt other people, then I think I have admiration for those, not particularly just Extinction Rebellion, but for those who would really put themselves on the line for this, really take time. I know, because I spoke to Extinction Rebellion protesters last time around before the pandemic, take time out of their jobs, take time out of their family lives to go and protest, to go and spend time at the various demonstrations that took place. And not all of it was sensible. Not all of it was good. And of course, Cressida Dick has to think about how she polices that activity in the middle of a big city. But I wonder whether she's right or not about whether Londoners or anyone will have a sense of antipathy towards these protests and roll your eyes and say, oh, there they are again. Ugh. Or is your admiration, respect growing for organisations like Extinction Rebellion? Or those who would protest in this way, whether they're with Extinction Rebellion or not. I wonder, is she right when she says people don't want these protests? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. Rachel's here. Rachel Venables, LBC's correspondent. Just give us a flavour of what she said this morning, Rachel.
Well, of course, Sheila, we know that Extinction Rebellion first burst onto the scene in Easter 2019. That was the first major rebellion throughout London. And although there have been protests around the world since, there certainly were other protests before, and we know there are more to come. For those first 2 weeks in that spring, they took control of London bridges. They parked a big pink boat in Oxford Circus and really just generally caused as much peaceful disruption as possible in the most creative and bright and vivid ways that they could. Certainly at that time, Extinction Rebellion took London and absolutely the Metropolitan Police by real surprise. Just the sheer numbers of them, the way they were prepared, you'll remember, to be arrested en masse in their demands for things like a declaration of a climate emergency. They wanted a citizens' assembly to tackle climate change and a governmental commitment for greenhouse gas emissions to be reduced to net zero by 2025. Of course, you'll know those aims have not yet been met, despite ongoing protests, and now they say they are coming back again, and they're calling it the Impossible Rebellion. The group say from the 23rd of August they plan to disrupt the capital for 2 weeks, the City of London in particular. And this morning on Call the Commissioner on LBC, the Met Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick told us she is really, really disappointed that they are coming back again.
Many people may be very interested in the cause. I don't think London supports hugely disruptive protests which cause people not to be able to go around their normal business at all. And the fact that they've chosen to do it over the August bank holiday, which for us is always our peak weekend of the year, is extremely frustrating, frankly.
Now, her comments, it's fair to say, sparked something of a controversy this morning, and Extinction Rebellion certainly are of the belief, when you talk to them, Shelagh, that they have managed to shift the public mood a little, certainly reframing the conversation since they started in 2019. And they will no doubt, of course, be emboldened by that UN report that came out earlier in the week, which said that the planet is heading for man-made disaster if we don't limit our carbon emissions and keep the temperature rising capped. But at the same time, for Londoners, particularly business owners, already hit so badly by the pandemic, the idea of massively disruptive protests for the last 2 weeks of the summer holidays is likely to be very infuriating indeed.
And do we know the nature of what they have planned in those 2 weeks?
Well, that's always tricky to predict, but I can tell you that from the off, they're calling on people to meet them at 10 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd, in Trafalgar Square, where they plan to launch, they say, crisis talks. And then throughout that week, I've seen on their plans, the documents they've been sharing amongst their followers, they talk about occupations continuing. So clearly they want to seize hold of something, lock something down. We just don't know what. They have a really interesting method where they tell just enough that, you know, something big is coming, but they never really fully reveal their plans. And this, of course, will provide huge difficulties for the Met Police. There are also a number of marches planned on the Saturdays throughout London, again, hugely resource intensive. And I've certainly spoken to officers in the past forced to work through these protests. We're talking about 20-hour shifts, with police being bussed in from around the country as well to help manage and keep the public safe. But the Commissioner this morning, Dame Cressida Dick, insists they will be ready for them.
They will be met with a fair, lawful, and we have to stick within the law, but firm, and where we possibly can be, preemptive response. They've indicated they are interested in the City of London. I want to reassure you that we work incredibly closely with our colleagues in City of London Police, and it will be a joint operation, and we will seek to balance people's rights. People have the right to assemble, they have the right to express themselves, they have the right to cause, you know, a reasonable amount of disruption in that, it is clear. However, unreasonable disruption. You can call a number of cases have indicated that
disruption to be caused.
It's not. Look, if you look at the case law, Nick, you can see that it is to be expected in an assembly that there will be some small amount of disruption, and the courts support that.
And therein, just lastly, Shelagh, lies a huge challenge ongoing for the police and the courts, because recently a slew of Extinction Rebellion protesters won legal victories after the Crown Prosecution Service dropped cases against people who were arrested and convicted of blocking the roads, thanks to a Supreme Court ruling which clarified that protest is a lawful excuse for doing just that. And so Extinction Rebellion will be emboldened, and it'll be a really tricky one for the police to try and navigate.
Thank you, Rachel. Rachel Venables, LBC's correspondent. Listening to that was Paul Stevens, police liaison for Extinction Rebellion, former detective sergeant in the Met. Good afternoon to you, Paul.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Dame Cressida Dick said in her conversation with Nick this morning that she doesn't believe that Extinction Rebellion engages properly with the police ahead of these events, and disingenuous about what they can expect from their members is the word she used. Your reply to that?
We're really clear about how we engage with the police. In September, we had 4 one-hour meetings with the police before the September rebellion. And on each occasion, we told them what we were going to do. And we asked for their feedback as to, you know, what was going to be acceptable disruption and what wasn't, because we want it to be open to everybody, family friendly on the first 2 days, especially. And we wanted to know what was acceptable. And we didn't want a Section 14, as in lawful conditions, placed on the protest. And on 4 occasions, we were told the command team would get back, and they didn't get back. They just slapped us with a Section 14. So they have been listening to what we've had to say, and they have not been talking to us. It's not been a dialogue. We're frustrated with that because we want to work with them. And I challenge the Commissioner on air to give us an example of when we have not been truthful. It is absolutely fundamental that whatever we tell them is truthful, because our safety and the safety of all the protesters and the police and the public relies on a truthful relationship. However, what we don't do is tell them about things that might give the police the heads up of somebody going to maybe use super glue on a building.
Okay.
Then they'll have a row of police in the way. So we don't tell them everything, but whatever we tell them is absolutely true.
She also doesn't believe you have enough control over the actions of your members, that there will be those who essentially go rogue and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, we're a movement. I'm not seeking control, but if you look at how the protests
hang on that. Sorry, I will let you answer that, but you do understand that that's fine and noble. Like, I hear you, but the risk in that of not controlling the rigor of your expectations for people's behaviour is that in your name, in the name of Extinction Rebellion, all kinds of things happen that may not be acceptable.
Well, we have values which we all sign up to.
What are they?
But it's not hierarchical.
What are the values? What are the values?
Well, there are many, like respect everyone, for example, is one of them. To welcome everyone and every part of everyone. That's what I saw when I walked into their HQ at the beginning as an ex-copper, thinking it was going to be a bit hostile. It was to welcome me and every part of me, even though I came from a policing background. I'm not going to go through all 10.
But was digging up the lawn of Trinity College, Cambridge, respecting all?
It's absolutely proportionate. We're in a do-or-die situation.
It's not respecting, though, is it? It's not respecting.
It's not disrespecting a person. We're talking about respecting people. So when we're looking at, for example, dealing with the police, they're
so any damage to property is acceptable because it's not a person that you're hurting.
Damage to property is proportionate compared to deaths of millions of people. Absolutely.
Oh gosh, listen, anything's proportionate compared to deaths of millions of people.
Absolutely.
All right, yeah. Okay. So all right, Paul, hang on. You have just said that damage to property, I asked the question, was any damage to property, is that proportionate? You have just said, in relation to the deaths of millions of people, any damage to property is proportionate.
Yes.
That's not true, is it, Paul?
Well, I believe it is, yes.
Oh, do you? Okay, so let me give you some examples then that might happen. Okay. Well, there was the lawn at Trinity College. If somebody goes to Trafalgar Square and, somehow takes a mechanical digger and sledgehammer or whatever to some of the statues there and the monuments there, or goes along to somebody's house and smashes it up because they're a banker, or goes to a tube and smashes every window in it, or goes to a car that's diesel and drags the person out of the car. No, sorry, not people. We're not hurting people. Just I don't know, takes the tyres out of the car that the person's trying to drive around London. All of that's acceptable, is it?
It's got to be in line with the aim. You've got an aim for every protest. You have an aim.
Yeah, but come on, and just talk like a normal human being, Paul. Is it acceptable to do that to people's property?
What, for no reason? No.
Not for no reason. Not for no reason. In relation to the horrors of millions of people. I'm not. Real things are happening. Trinity College lawn was the perfect example. I think that was an outrage.
Well, if you think a bit of lawn is an outrage, compared to what we're facing.
No. We've already dealt with the comparison. Anything is acceptable comparative to killing millions of people. No, I'm not. I'm talking about the moral choices being made by you and your members. That's all I'm talking about.
This is an interesting conversation. If people want to discuss it, come along on this day.
Oh, that's dodging it, Paul. You're dodging it. If this is what your meetings with Cressida Dick are like, then you are disingenuous. Just saying, come along in a couple of weeks and talk to me. I'm talking to you now, and you're not answering the question about where the limits are for Extinction Rebellion.
It's a ridiculous question.
Where are your limits? Why is it ridiculous?
Because you don't seem to understand the proportionality of what we're facing. I do.
I understand. I know it's. I do.
Do you understand that every day that we procrastinate, every day that we continue to invest in fossil fuels, means not only thousands more people will die, but it also means it will cost us more to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm not. So Paul, you're misunderstanding my.
Let me finish, please. When the government are saying that, I'm not sure if poor people can afford to pay for climate change, it's their decision who pays for it. Not, it doesn't have to be put on the lowest in society, or the lowest incomes in society. That's a ridiculous argument.
Paul, I think you're misunderstanding my position here. I think you're misunderstanding my position here. I applaud. All right, can I speak now? Can I speak now? I applaud people who take to the streets and try to protect the planet. I applaud that. I'm trying to decide what the limits of that behaviour is. I'm trying to work out where you draw the line. And it seems to me you draw the line in quite a dangerous place.
Absolutely not. Completely non-violent. We're always non-violent. Over 3,000
towards human beings. Towards human beings.
Well, violence is about.
But smashing up somebody's house is a violence to them. I'm not saying you have. I'm just saying I'm asking you to draw a moral line, and you're not prepared to.
Okay, I'll tell you. When the brave women considered cracking a window at Barclays Bank because they invest the most than any other European funder in fossil fuels. When they did, they had 6 weeks of discussion to decide whether that was violent or not. That's the kind of depth they go into. And they ended up, and they actually came forward. They were all women, and they came forward and said, I cannot live with myself if I don't do something to try and make an impact. And you've got to respect that. 6 weeks of discussions as to whether it was acceptable or not. So we're not flippant about it. We're not careless about these things. And we really wish we didn't have to do it. We really wish the government were doing their job properly.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Paul Stevens, Police Liaison for Extinction Rebellion.